Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Yasho Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Shri Radha Madhav ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Gorakanande, Hari Hari. Okay, so Hare Krishna. Thank you all for coming to the Sunday Peace Lecture. So, as most of you probably might already know, this is my first time ever speaking for the Sunday Peace Lecture. So, see, I'm not going to lie, it's a little bit intimidating, but I'm going to try my best. I think that the one thing that I've realized already through this experience is that I'm starting to realize what Arjun must have felt like, you know, when he got into the middle of the battlefield, right? So Krishna pulls up his rath into the middle of the field, and then, you know, he sees his elders like Bhishma Dev, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, all these people, you know, his elders who, you know, his teachers who, you know, made him who he was. And I kind of feel similarly, you know, I'm just sitting right here and Vipramananda Mataji, Nirantar Prabhuji, my parents, and, you know, all the devotees who have been there since we first started coming to the temple. So, you know, with your blessings, hopefully I can say something that's useful. Okay. So the topic of this class is how to make the perfect investment. So when I was given the task or the service of coming up with this class, I was told to come up with something that would be both practical and related to the Bhagavad Gita. which in itself is kind of a challenge because I feel like the entire Gita is pretty practical. But so one thing that I was thinking about specifically is what is something that everyone could improve on. And as I thought about it more, what I realized is that I think one thing that we all could work on is just following through with our goals and just the process of improving itself. And that's kind of the theme of the class for today. And especially given the time of year, with New Year's coming, I thought that it would be appropriate to talk about, resolutions and how we can become resolute and make goals that we can actually achieve. So there's 4 things that I hope to accomplish in today's class. So the first one is I want to define the path of the resolute and our eternal identities. So you'll see when we get to the verse what that means. And then I want to explain the 2 levels of Bhakti-Yoga. Thirdly, I want to explain what it means to be resolute. And then finally, we'll talk about how to become resolute, and we'll do an exercise. So it's more practical. Okay, so here's the verse. So repeat after me. Vyavyasatmika buddhir eka kurunandana bahushaka hi anantascha buddhayo vyavashayinam. Okay, you want to read the translation? So for those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So I'll read it one more time. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. O beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So just a little bit of context about where this verse is coming from. So this is from the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text 41. And so what's happening at this point of the Bhagavad Gita is that Arjun, his chariot is in the middle of the battlefield, and he's having this dilemma. He doesn't want to fight the battle because he sees all of his elders on the other side of the battlefield, and he doesn't want to fight them. And so that's kind of the context of what's going on at this point. And so earlier in the chapter, Krishna begins to describe to Arjun the nature of the soul, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But at this point, he's describing the process of Bhakti-Yoga, and that's one of the points of this class. So before we move on, I wanted to kind of analyze the verse and deconstruct it a little bit to see what specifically is being talked about. So the translation is over here, but before we move on, just one thing. I want this class to be interactive. That's just kind of how I've been used to all of my classes, in school and stuff. There's normally interaction between the teacher and the audience, and hopefully we can try to do some of that. So anyways, if the audience can answer this. So what do you think is meant by the path in the context of this verse? Okay, so path to the ultimate goal. Anything else? Self-realization. Anyone else? Krishna consciousness? Any other ideas? Bhakti-Yoga? Yeah, those are all great answers, and they're basically correct. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But then, now the second part of the verse, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So what does that mean? What does it mean to be many-branched? No goal. Anyone else? Sins, okay. Any other ideas? A lot of distractions, yeah. Yeah, not realistic. Oh, materialistic, okay. Yeah. Any other ideas? Yeah, I mean, basically everyone's kind of touched on the meaning of both the path and many-branched. So one thing that I wanted to make clear is that as devotees, our purpose ultimately should be to get out of this cycle of repeated birth and death. So the Bhagavad Gita tells us that we've been in this cycle for basically as long as anyone could remember, right? For all of time, we've been in the process of reincarnation and taking birth again and again. And because we have this human form of life, we're fortunate enough to elevate our consciousness to a point where we can get out of the cycle of birth and death. And that's the point of human life, is to be able to do that. And so that's what's meant by the path. So like self-realization, Krishna consciousness, everyone kind of touched on that. And more importantly, it's to understand our eternal identities. And so we'll touch more about that and how it relates to Buddha Yoga, but everyone kind of alluded to it in your answers. So now the thing is, a lot of us theoretically kind of know what that means, right? We've heard that we've been in the cycle of birth and death for so many, millions of lifetimes. But the thing is, how convinced are we of that, right? And what would it look like if we were convinced? Because we've spent so much of our lives just doing, whatever normal or any other person would do. So how convinced are we? And I think that's the main impediment that might be blocking a lot of our progress. And so that brings me to the second point, which is, are we making the most progress that we can be making? And so I was careful when I made that point, because one might argue that, yeah, we are making progress, but are we making the most progress that we can be making? Given all the resources that we have and, all the books and everything that we have given to us. And if not, the question is why? And so Prahlad Maharaj says that a lot of us are chewing the chewed, right? Charvita charvananam. That's the Sanskrit for it. And so we can choose to live a life that's been lived before, right? You can go to school, you can get married, you can have kids, you can go to work every day, but eventually that just becomes very mundane, right? And you can choose to live a life like that. Or we can choose to elevate our consciousness and do something that's more fulfilling. And that's the goal of Krishna consciousness, is to get out of this process of birth and death, to do something that is more fulfilling. So yeah, Subal Prabhuji mentioned in his class a couple weeks ago the whole idea of the rat race, right? So material civilization is compared to this rat race, where we're all competing to do the same thing, get promotions, get the most money, make ourselves known to the public, gain fame, all these very small kind of trivial things. And so we could do that if we want to truly spend our lives pursuing that. We have that ability. But the goal of Krishna consciousness is to do something that's superior to that. And we'll talk more about that. And so one thing that I wanted to mention is that spirituality is exciting, right? So a lot of us, I think, there's this misconception that spirituality can be boring or very austere. And I think that's what deters a lot of people from practicing spirituality, is because it's something that, we associate with being bored, or just, it's not as exciting. And what I think is true is that, it turns out we can make it as exciting as we want it to be. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had this vision for us to spread the Krishna consciousness movement, to every town and village. That doesn't have to be a boring process, right? We don't have to sit at home the whole day and just meditate or go to a forest or do anything like that. So we have the ability to be spiritual entrepreneurs. And so I have a couple of pictures here to kind of prove that point. So in the top right, does anyone know who that is? Yeah, George Harrison. I think everyone knows who it is, but I was thinking, who could be someone that we could compare it to today? And after thinking for a while, I couldn't really come up with someone, but I guess, like Kanye West or Justin Bieber or something, kind of get the idea, like some kind of, pop icon. But the point is, the devotees in the 1960s and 70s actually went out of their way to meet George Harrison, and that's pretty exciting, I think. In the middle, that's Radhanath Swami with Barack Obama. Anyone know who Obama is? And then very recently, we had the Viva Cultura, the show recently here in Naperville. And I think that's pretty exciting too, like how often are we able to do something like that? Devotees are able to use their talents. If for people who are musically inclined or they enjoy performing, you can use whatever talents we have in Krishna's service. So, that's another way of just saying that spirituality does not have to be boring. And then on the bottom right, that's a picture of a retreat that we have for the youth called the Sangha Initiative. And a lot of you have been to the Sangha Initiative already, or not all of you, but some of you have. But it's a very exciting time for youth from all over the country and some parts of the world even to come practice Krishna consciousness together. And then finally, in the bottom left, does anyone know what that is? That's our future. Yeah. So that's the ISKCON temple of Naperville, right? So in a couple years, that's where we're going to be sitting right now. So that's pretty exciting in my opinion. And then I just wanted to add, anecdotally, I've had a lot of opportunities to do very interesting things just because of my involvement, with the temple. Like just recently, we had the Viva Cultura festival, and I got to be the MC for that. If I wasn't practicing Krishna consciousness, like where would you get that opportunity, And there's so many unique things. Even in college, I got to be involved with teaching some principles of Bhakti-Yoga to my peers. If I wasn't in Krishna consciousness, like where would you get an opportunity to form friendships and interact with people like that? So spirituality is exciting. So the next thing I wanted to talk about were the 2 levels of Bhakti-Yoga. So the first level that is discussed in the purport of this verse is that we need to understand that our position as the eternal spirit soul, and that's the first level of Buddhi Yoga. And so in the Gita it mentions that every living entity has a soul. And notice that we said every living entity, so not just human beings, but even animals and plants and all other life forms, what they have in common is that they have a soul. And so the soul is what gives the body life. So now, the question that I wanted to pose to everyone is, how can knowledge of the soul change the way that we interact with the world around us? So we'll get like 2 or 3 answers and then we can... So seeing the divine in everything around us. Yeah. So we'll be more humble because we realize that we all have something in common, which is the soul. Anything else? So we can change our perspectives from the temporary to the eternal. Anything else? Sorry? Yeah, so to be non-violent, to not harm other living entities. See everybody equally. Yeah. So that's perfect, and you kind of took what I was going to say. But yeah, so the reason I added this picture was to kind of convey the point that everyone sort of mentioned already. And so once we realize that all living entities have a spirit soul, I think that it should make us more humble, right? Because you realize that you're not greater than any other living being, because we all have the soul in common. And so you gain humility through that. And then, like Mataji mentioned, you also have more of a perspective. Realize that where we are right now is just a point in time, right? We've been reincarnated over and over again. And so once you realize that, you kind of, you have the option of getting out of that cycle of repeated birth and death. So that's the first level of Buddhi Yoga, is just realizing that we aren't the body and that we are the soul. So now the second level is above the recognition of the soul, is understanding our constitutional position as servants of Krishna. And so what's different about this is, instead of seeing things as material energy or spiritual energy, we see everything as Krishna's energy, right? And with that perspective, you can use anything in Krishna's service. So one thing that I was thinking about recently is, social media, right? A lot of us are active on social media nowadays, and it's a huge force that impacts a lot of our lives. And so I was thinking that even social media can be used in Krishna's service. So just recently we had the Giving Tuesday, right? And there was a fundraiser that was started for the Naperville Temple by some devotees. And we were able to raise $49,000, more than $49,000, right? Yeah. Just using material energy, or something that, we might consider material. So what I'm trying to say is, once we realize that everything is ultimately a manifestation of Krishna's energy, we can use everything in Krishna's service. And so, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said that Jiveras Rupa Oi, Krishnera Nityadas. And so what does that mean? That means that we're all eternal servants of Krishna. Okay. So next I wanted to discuss what it means to be irresolute. Because one of the points that was mentioned in the verse is that the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. So what does it mean to be irresolute? So in a spiritual context, irresolution is any action that leads us away from Krishna, right? And so misguided good intentions can even make us irresolute. And so I'll unpack that a little bit. So, whether we want to pursue education or we want to become more serious about our work and occupation or even service to humanity, all of these different things have the potential to bind us to the material world. And so if we're misguided in our attentions, all of these things can potentially make us irresolute. But if they're guided properly, so guided good intentions, on the contrary, can be used in Krishna's service, right? We can use our education, we could even use our occupation, our skills, our interests, whatever we want in Krishna's service. So we have that ability as well. And then service to humanity. Later in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna and Arjuna are discussing, and what's mentioned at one point, Krishna goes down a list where he says, if you can't do devotional service, do this. If you can't do this, do this. And then at one point he says, if you can't do anything, at least give to charity, right? Because that'll make you pious enough to come to the state where you can practice Bhakti-Yoga. Okay. And then I wanted to discuss resolution. So what is resolution? It's the opposite of irresolution. And so basically, it's actions which ultimately bring us closer to Krishna. And then what's unique about resolution is that it gives us insight, right? We gain new perspectives and we can shift the way we think by developing resolution. And so as an example of that, Prabhupada throughout his lifetime was asked by a number of different people, have you seen God before, right? And what's interesting is he never gave one answer. Depending on who asked him the question, he would give a different answer, right? Because he understood their intention. When they came to him, he knew the mood they were approaching him. So sometimes people would approach him and say, have you seen God before? And he would say, if I told you so, would you believe in God? Right? So, and then other times he would say, yeah, I've seen God before. And then sometimes he said no. So the thing is, once you have that resolution and you're able to understand what the ultimate purpose is, it changes the way we see the world and the way we interact with people. And then in the same vein, it provides a framework for decision making. So when Prabhupada came to the West, he was criticized by a lot of his godbrothers in India still, right? Because from their perspective, what he was doing wasn't according to Shastra, right? He was preaching to hippies and people who were using drugs and alcohol and were really degraded in the way they think, And so they kind of outcast him because of the way he was thinking. But at the same time, that didn't stop Prabhupada, right? Even though he had all this criticism, he had the determination to keep doing what he was doing, and because of that, he started this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And so that's what having resolution can do for us. Once we have the resolution, we can understand the higher purpose, and so it provides a framework for decision making. Okay, so now more about the topic of the class. So I called it, how to make the perfect investment. And really, the perfect investment is studying Shastra and becoming more involved in understanding our true identity. Because that's something that will, get us out of the cycle of birth and death. And so we have Gita Jayanti coming up on December 18th. And so I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. And so one thing that we can do to make the perfect investment is to begin reading the Bhagavad Gita, or really any transcendental literature. And so I've written, the systematic study of transcendental literature will transform our lives. Right? So even if, I know for myself, sometimes it's difficult to find time to read. But what I've noticed is even if you could read a single page a day and really just think about it a little bit, it has the potential to be very transformative. Even if it's just a page or a paragraph, whatever you can read, whatever we can do, just, given our time constraints, it's still important to have some regular source of inspiration and insight. It really can change the way that we see the world. It can give us conviction, right? So once we have knowledge about the Shastra, even if people come to us with doubts or, whatever situations that people have, we'll have insights that the Shastra has given to us that can potentially be useful to other people. Or if you get small questions like, oh, why are you vegetarian? Or how do you explain the process of reincarnation? Stuff like that, small things that, that you could potentially not know how to answer. By studying Shastra, you'll gain the insight and the intelligence to answer things like that. And additionally, it can give us detachment. So Lord Buddha I'm not sure how many people actually know his story, but he was a prince. Lord Buddha was a prince in his court, and he had all of the riches, right? He was from a kingdom that there's really no poverty, but he still didn't feel any fulfillment, despite being in a kingdom where he had everything. And so he wanted to find self-actualization through meditation. And what he discovered is that he didn't need to have the kingdom to do that. And so he just gave it up. At age 24, he had the whole world, but he just let go of it because he wasn't attached. Srimad Maharaj Parikshit, when he found out that he had 7 days left to live, he had the option to do whatever he wanted. He can go to Disney, he could go to Spain, Italy, whatever he wanted to do, but he didn't do any of that, right? He chose to dedicate his life to studying, to hearing from Mahabhagavats. And so now I'm going to transition more into how to become resolute. And so the best way to become resolute is to find a spiritual mentor or someone who can guide us along the way, to give us knowledge tailored to us specifically. And the thing is, we can try out of our own endeavor to make progress spiritually, but once we have a guru or someone to guide us, we can make progress much faster. And it's likened. So we have the invocation prayer, right? Om Gyanantimirandasya, we say that invocation prayer. And that's basically the meaning of that verse, is that we're born into ignorance, and that's likened to being in a darkened room, right? So imagine like a pitch black room and you can't see anything. And the only way you can navigate it is if there's light, right? You can try getting to the exit if there's a door in the room just by your own speculation, right? We can just wander around in the darkness and, maybe like by chance we'll get the door. Or you could just turn on the light, right? If you have someone to turn on the light, we can find it a lot faster. And so that's what having a spiritual mentor is like. We can endeavor on our own, but if you have someone to give you guidance tailored to your own needs, it's much faster to make progress spiritually. And this principle isn't really unique to spirituality, right? So if you want to make progress in anything, it's really helpful to have a teacher. So one example that I wanted to bring up was Atul Gawande. Does anyone know who he is? Just curious. Yeah. Okay. Anyways, he's a surgeon, and basically he is one of the top surgeons at Harvard, and he's been working all of his life. And what he realized at one point was that he'd become so good at surgery that he figured out that he wasn't making any progress, right? And he really thought about that for some time. So for 10 years of his career, he was just stagnant, because he was at the top. And so what he wanted to do was find a way to become better at what he's doing. And so he had people come in that weren't really in his field of medicine. Just random people come in and observe him doing surgery, and they would give him advice, right? And after he got this advice, he discovered that if he had a 2-hour surgery, he could do it in 1 hour, just because he had someone else giving him another perspective. And so the point is that by having a spiritual mentor, we can make progress a lot faster. Okay. So, like Mataji mentioned, I'm in medical school right now, and a lot of our education is done using case studies, right? And so basically the idea of a case study is that it's something that's very practical, a story or a situation that everyone can kind of relate to, and then you work together in teams to kind of solve the case. And so that's what we're going to do now. We have a case study. So I'll read the case. So Bhakta Bab started coming to your Bhakti Vriksha 6 months ago and would like to take his practice of Krishna consciousness more seriously. Additionally, he realizes that he is 20 pounds overweight and wants to become healthier. He shares with your Bhakti Vriksha that his goal for the next year is to read more and lose weight. So the question is this a good goal? If not, how can we make it better? So we'll take like a couple minutes, just discuss with the people next to you, and then I'll call on a couple of people, and then we can share our answers. So you can discuss with whoever's next to you. So we'll discuss for 1 more minute. Okay, so I heard a lot of discussion, which is really nice. So yeah, what did you guys come up with? What is this a good goal? And then if not, how can we make it better? So it could be more specific and timely. Anyone else? No more? Okay. No, yeah, that's an interesting answer. I didn't even think of that. That's a valid point. You want to say it louder? People couldn't hear it. So just go to the forest and starve, basically. Okay, that's an interesting answer. Anyone else? Prabhuji? Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, that's good. Anyone else, Ravi? Yeah. You can read on the treadmill. You all are so spiritual, spiritually minded. So we'll come back, or yeah, we'll do one more point and then we'll move on. Right. Wow, that was profound. Thank you. Okay, so you guys pretty much took everything I was going to say, but so has anyone heard of the SMART goal, or what? Yeah. So a couple of you have heard of what it means to make a SMART goal. And so, like a lot of people have been alluding to, SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So Risha actually kind of nailed like 3 of them. But anyway, so like a lot of people mentioned, one of the flaws in his goals is that it wasn't very specific, right? So good goals are well defined. For example, I would like to chant 4 rounds. They're measurable. So is there a metric that you can use to measure your progress of the goal? So for example, if you're trying to lose 10 pounds, did you actually lose 10 pounds? They're attainable and realistic. So this is kind of saying the same thing, but basically you want to do something that you can actually, do realistically. So if you have a goal of chanting 64 rounds a day, that's wonderful. That's really great. But can you actually do that? So that's a lot of time. And then the last point is that they're timely. So in order for us to really succeed our goals and become resolute, we need to set deadlines for ourselves. Right? You can say that you want to do this, but unless you have a date where you can evaluate your progress consistently, there's no real way of knowing whether you're going to reach your goal or not. So it's important to have some kind of timeliness element to your goals. Okay, so back to Bhakta Bob. So now the next part of the exercise is to construct a SMART goal for Bhakta Bob. So now that you know his goals of reading more and losing weight, using this template for making goals, try to come up with a SMART goal for Bhakta Bob. So discuss for like a couple of minutes and then we'll come back and share. And if you need to write it down, that might make it easier too. So feel free to write it down on an iPhone or something like that. Just one more minute. Okay, so you can finish writing down your thoughts, and we can start sharing. So if any group has already thought of their goal, you can raise your hand and share with the class, and we can discuss. Okay, so Risha. Okay, yeah, that's a good goal. You said you had a second one, or is that they were okay? Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? So what about for his weight loss goal?
You will get a microphone.
Oh, we have a microphone, okay.
You will get a microphone if you want to speak.
So doing Ekadasi. Just kidding. Yeah, fasting once a week. Right. So anyone have a SMART goal? So ideally, oops. Yes. Anyone have a goal in the SMART format for either the weight loss one or the reading more? Okay. Yeah, that's good. So it was just small things that he could do, just very small changes that wouldn't require him to alter his lifestyle so much. So yeah, that's the right idea. Does anyone else want to share one more thing, or we move on? Yeah, that kind of relates. Right. Yeah, so I think what Prabhuji is saying is it kind of goes hand in hand, right? So the more we read, the more we'll naturally become stronger devotees and gain the conviction to read even more. Right, right. Exactly, yeah. Right. And so, I mean, everyone's basically been coming up with great goals. And so I came up with a couple of SMART goals for Bob. So yeah, for example, a goal could be, I would like to read one chapter of Bhagavad Gita every week and be finished with the Gita by May 1st, versus I would like to read more. Right. So the idea is that in the SMART goal, it's a lot more specific, and you know what you have to do. And so you're less likely to get off track with your goal because there's something very specific to attain. And then similarly, I would like to lose 1 pound a week by exercising for at least 60 minutes a week. In 10 weeks, I would like to lose 10 pounds. Right. So it's more short term, so you know exactly what you have to do. Versus I would just like to lose weight. And so I just wanted to summarize kind of everything we've discussed already. So when I started the class, I said I had 4 learning objectives for everyone to kind of gain. That's the first thing that I wanted to do was define what the path of the Resolute is and establish what it means to establish what our eternal identities are. So the path of the Resolute, like a lot of people said, was to practice Bhakti-Yoga, right? To become so firm in our conviction that we realize that the goal of this life is to stop taking birth again and go back to Krishna. And then the second point was to understand the 2 levels of Bhakti-Yoga. So the first level we discussed was understanding that we're not the body and that we're the soul. And the second level, which is superlative to that, is understanding that we're eternal servants of Krishna. So that's our real identity. And the sooner that we realize that, the faster we can progress our lives, or perfect our lives. And then the third point was to understand what it meant to be resolute. And so what it means to be resolute is to make the mission of our life to serve Krishna, right? And when we realize that, life becomes a lot more fulfilling and even exciting, right? Spirituality doesn't have to be boring. It can be exciting. And then finally, to understand how to become resolute. And so like Niranta Prabhuji mentioned and a couple of other people discussed, studying Shastra and associating with devotees, even if it's for a little bit of time, is sufficient to help us progress. And then, of course, making smart goals like we've been doing. So that's all I have. Thank you for listening and participating in the discussions. So, and we have a couple of minutes. If people have questions, I can try to answer them, but there's people who are more qualified. Yeah. I think, so the question is, how can we make spirituality exciting? And I think what's important is realizing what you're good at. And, you know, for different people, there's different things, right? For some of us, we're good at cooking. For some of us, we're horrible at cooking. You know, for some of us, we like music. And, you know, different people have different interests. And the amazing thing about Krishna consciousness is that there's space to use whatever interest that you have in Krishna's service, right? So whatever it is that interests you, if you enjoy using Facebook or Instagram, you know, there's a way you can use that in Krishna's service. If you enjoy painting or art, you know, there's a way you can use that in Krishna's service. So really, everything has the potential to be used in Krishna's service. And so once you can identify what it is about, you know, what interests you, I think that will really help can help make spirituality more enjoyable and exciting. Yeah, so this kind of relates to what Shruti's answer was earlier. I think, so when I was describing the SMART goal, you know, the A can represent attainable or accountable, right? So I think it's really helpful when you have someone to hold you accountable. And that's the advantage of having a spiritual mentor or a bhakti vriksha or some friends that can help guide you along the way, right? Because when you have someone to remind you, like, hey, have you finished your chapter of Bhagavad Gita? Then, you know, that'll hold us accountable, I think. And it's harder to fall off track when you have someone to remind you. Anything else? Turn it on.
How do we help that, I guess, dividing line and kind of break that down at school and at home? Because, you know, at home, our parents have that spiritualistic minds of God, God, God. And at school, when you go to school, nobody really knows Krishna consciousness over there. So you kind of have to act like, oh, you're one of those people. So how do you keep that break in between the two?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And I think for like any youth growing up in Krishna consciousness, that's the real question, right? It's like, how do you get over that divide of, you know, I have my spiritual life and then material life, and you have to bridge that gap somehow. And once you bridge that gap, it's a lot more comfortable to be yourself. And I think the one thing that's helped me personally is making friends who, you know, share a similar situation to you, right? It's like, luckily, you know, in Chicago and Naperville, we have so many devotee youth, right? And even outside of, you know, even outside of Chicago and Naperville, there's people across the nation who we can, you know, talk to about our challenges as students and adults and people working. So I think the short answer to your question is association. I think that's what's been most beneficial for me, is just talking with like-minded people. And you know, we have programs like the Sangha Initiative, which I'm sure you know about, which are great outlets to interact with a lot of other people that are our, you know, in our cohort, in our age group. So I think that's really helpful. But yeah. And then the other thing is, kind of similar to the answer that I was giving Mohan Prabhuji, is just, you know, once you find what makes you excited about practicing spirituality, And then once you can find out what that is, amp that up, start doing that more. I think that makes it easier to bridge the gap between our material and spiritual lives. Yeah, that's so true. And I have to say that the reason I'm here is because of my parents. And they, yeah. But yeah, like when you're a teenager, a lot of us like have angst, right? Like everything your parents say is wrong, and like everything, and at one point you just have to accept that you really don't. And the sooner that we realize that, the easier it is to grow as a person. But yeah, I think parenting is obviously a huge factor, the first factor. Anyone else? Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, Prabhuji. Yeah. Does anyone else have anything to add or any other questions? Comment?
Very loud, like you there, and it was really very interactive lecture, and we all
Thank you, Ravi.
So Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Ravi. Thank you so much for that wonderful class. And please give him a big hand. I was eagerly looking forward for Ravi's class. And what I would like to say is, I was thinking in my mind that during this past so many years, when many of our children were attending Gita camp, and looking back at the first and second generation of students who have come out of that, I mean, we must have had 50, 60 to 80 students consistently for about 20 plus years. And out of that, about 10 of them have come to this level of the ability to understand the scriptures clearly and to be able to succinctly speak, and even to come to the point of having an interactive audience, audience participation. All these things, genuinely, they have learned things in their colleges, and they have learned things from the scriptural point of view from the temple. They are able to effectively present it, and this is the greatest investment you can make. Give him a big hand. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy to be here, and we look forward to hearing from you again in the years to come. This temple that we are building, this is for this next generation. These are the leaders, and this is the unique contribution that ISKCON has. You are our future. This reminds me also years ago, when during my younger days, when His Holiness Ramapada Swami Maharaj first started coming here as GBC, and we started many Bhakti Vriksha programs. Something that he very clearly told us to do is have children's programs simultaneously with the adult classes. What is the use of you going back to Godhead, leaving the children down there? So this is such a happiness to see in your lifetime what transformation you bring into the lives of next generation. So this is the unique contribution that we are instrumental because of the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and other spiritual masters in ISKCON, and we are very grateful for these children because they are unique. They are Krishna's gift, each one of our children. So I think I should thank our Sunday school teachers here, starting with Mohan Leela Prabhu and the team, continuing in that tradition in producing children like this. And once again, thank you, Ravi. Appreciate it very, very much. Just two quick announcements. One is His Holiness Ramapal Swami Maharaj will be in town. There will be home programs on December 19th and 20th. And also 20th and 21st, 6:30 in the morning, we have Srimad Bhagavatam classes here. So we invite you for all of that. The information is there on the website. We are having Gita Jayanti coming up on 18th. Ravi mentioned about it. And more you will be hearing from Shatarupa Mataji very soon. She will be speaking on that. Today's Sunday feast is sponsored by someone who is anonymous. And we wanted to pray for that family. And so please chant after me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And those of you who would like to sponsor in the coming Sundays, you can contact Abhay Prabhu over there. And Shatrupa is going to set up something very quick here in a couple of minutes. And this is about Gita Jayanti. And so please be patient for just a couple of minutes. She's getting ready.
Hare Krishna, sorry. Just few more minutes just to go over something that we have coming up. One second. Okay, so very nice session by Ravi Prabhu. Right on point for Gita Jayanti. So just wanted to highlight something that I got inspired from his session today. The purpose for the scriptures or reading Bhagavad Gita. He kind of brought out many points from everybody. Couple of points are like change the way that we see, that changes, and also gives it gives a higher purpose for living, right? When we think about ourselves, we can take a book for ourselves and then read to change our and also to find our higher purpose. There is one opportunity that happens only in the Gita Jayanti month that we do, is to share this with others. Share this change of perspective and share the higher purpose with others. Okay. Alright. So, something that we do specifically in Gita Marathon month and throughout the year, of course, is to place Bhagavad Gitas in motels, prisons, and libraries and hospices. Over the last 1 year, since last December, we have placed Bhagavad Gitas and other spiritual books in 6 prisons, 2 libraries, 33 hospices, and many motels that I don't have account for. And so with that, I want to just introduce the program that we have for nationally. It's going on. The program is called as Be a Giver. So, Shastra Dana. So, be a giver of knowledge. Be a giver of this opportunity for people to interact or come in contact with Bhagavad Gita. So, we would like to invite you for participating in this program by anything that you want to contribute, beginning with just sponsor 2 Bhagavad Gitas or 20 or 40 or 50 or how many ever you can, that we can place in these different places and offer this opportunity to others. And on Gita Jayanti day, to really help ourselves, we have Bhagavad Gita recitation from 6 to 9 p.m. That's the only day we do the whole recitation non-stop. It's very inspiring not to just get away from Bhagavad Gita for 3 hours and just be with Krishna, be with the words that Krishna spoke continuously for 3 hours. And you can come in any time. It's a working day. So if you get late, it's still fine. Any bit, it's like gulab jamun or ice cream. Whichever side you lick it, it's like it's going to be sweet. So if you happen to come after half an hour, 1 hour, just last 20 minutes, it's totally fine. So please try to come on Tuesday. The program will begin at 6 and end at 9. And we'll have some Ekadasi Prasadam. It's also Mokshada Ekadasi on that day. Oh, I have a wrong flyer over there. It states 2017. So it's also Mokshada Ekadasi on that day. Very, very auspicious to give and take Bhagavad Gita. So please try to come. And this is a thing, this is the drive that is going on nationally. All across North America, this Prabhupada Marathon has been going on. The goal is in December to have 10,000 givers of Bhagavad Gita. No matter how many you give, 10,000 givers. So as of now, 285, where only 285 people have given through this program. We still have a lot, and from Naperville, we would like to do at least 108. Out of 10,000, just 108 at least. We will offer from as ISKCON Naperville and the broader Naperville community, because it's the welfare activity for everybody. Whoever is here, if we do, it actually brings a positive impact on whoever is not here also. That's the potency of spiritual books, that we do something and we can spread it even to those who are not present here. So please try to come and participate and take part in Bhagavad Gita recitation, worship Bhagavad Gita that day. You know, just physically worship. There'll be a fire sacrifice. We'll get an opportunity to participate in the fire sacrifice, and also take back a Bhagavad Gita with you or multiple to give it as gift. This is the gift season, holiday season, New Year, Christmas, everything. So you can take some books actually to give it to your friends, family, anybody. It's our humble request and appeal, and we want to share this joy of sharing Bhagavad Gita. So as we take darshan, after darshan, we will have our Premananda Mataji and Nirantara Prabhu. Yeah. So they'll be there to actually share this joy of sharing by giving one of those orange color bands that Leeleshwari Mata is holding. It says, "Be a giver." So share it with us, and if you so desire to share with else, take some books and share with others. But please do come on